What's going on, everybody? Gunner here, and today I'm going to walk you through the Trout Nugget XL tutorial. And basically I had somebody order a color combo like a natural or something, or a natural over white, and when I finished it I just couldn't take my eyes off it. So I just wanted to show you guys the color combo. I kind of have this video up online, but I figured we'd do a higher quality video. So basically I'm going to teach you all the techniques on the back hook. That way we can just kind of walk through the front hook and have story time. But material wise, you're going to need a rabbit zonker. We're going to put some, this is Mirage Flashabou off the back. Our belly is going to be stacked SF fiber. And we're mostly going to do white, but we're going to do some blends up in the front half. And then we're going to do a head of Frankenfly monster dubbing. So what I have going on so far, the back hook is a size 4 Ahrex light stinger hook, Nordic Salt light stinger hook. I'm going to come in with 2 strands of Mirage Flashabou and just pin those straight to the top of the hook. Run that back and trim it off somewhere around there. Now this rabbit zonker is just an 1/8 inch, nothing fancy. What I am going to do is I'm going to take the tip of it and I'm going to cut it into a point. And all that's doing is it's reducing the friction that the water is going to have in the back, right? As the water travels down your tail fibers, it's going to reduce its friction, and it's going to allow that water to accelerate and give the tail a little bit of a whip and a little bit of extra movement. So you can see I have just a little point right there cut into the hide. We're going to ignore that. So I'm grabbing up onto where the hide is square. We're going to measure off about 1.5 shank lengths. Measure that. Yep, I kind of like where that is. Wet your fingers. Push that hair back, and then I'm going to catch this with 4 wraps. The first one can be kind of light, and then I'm going to add pressure for the next 3. Now I like to take the tension out of that. I'm using a 140 power thread right now. We're going to wrap forward and then wrap back, and that's going to secure that thread so that thread can't back off. And then if you cut your hide just longer than your hook eye, you'll be able to pull that taut and get a really nice clean head on this fly. Now because we're not going to rib this or anything, I need to make sure this back tie-in's well secure. I'm going to hit that with a dab of glue. Good to go. And now we're going to start our stacking process. So basically, see if I can show you how much. You don't need a lot, especially on the back hook. But the whole point of this is to sculpt and shape your belly. So that's about how many fibers I have. Now we're going to take this at full length so far and we're going to cut it in half. And then we're going to cut each half in half. So you're going to end up using 1/4 of the Steve Farrar blend per stack. Now this first step is particular to me, but I have one that came from the middle, and that's got all square edges, and then I have one that came from the end, and that end's already tapered a little bit, so there's some longer fibers, and that's the one that I'm going to stack first because it's going to give me a little bit more length under that tail. And something that's nice about this SF is it's stiff enough that it's going to help keep that tail from fouling, because at 1.5 shank lengths it's pretty long. So I'm going to catch that. I didn't explain that real well, but I'll hit it on the, show you on the next one. Got a little ahead of myself. I'm just going to wrap that straight back. So what I just did is when I tapered my fibers, grabbed them in the middle and held this at a 45-degree angle kind of up to the hook shank and then wrapped it. So you can see right now I have an X. You can't really see that. Yeah, you can kind of see that. So you can see I kind of have this X going on. Then I'm going to take these fibers and draw them back, wrap over top, so I form a V. It forms a V this way, splitting the hook shank. And you're going to put 3 stacks on this back hook and 3 on the front hook. You'll end up with 1 section of extra fibers left over, I believe. Maybe 2. I forget. But anyway, it makes 2 flies you get just enough left over to make 2 flies exactly. So again, just doing V-style. All the stacks on both back and front hook are going to be V-styled just like that. Throw up a 1/2 inch, and then we're going to come forward, and what I like to do is take some hackle pliers. We left this skin a little bit long, right? And the purpose for doing that is so when I pull this tight, I'll have hair that I'll be able to trap that's going to be a little bit shorter, and it's going to make a nice forward leading taper into that hook eye. Pull that nice and taut, wrap up onto our SF stack, throw a 1/2 inch in there, and then I'm going to reach down and trim that nice and tight. Give that some thread and a whip finish, and we're good to go. Now if you get some of that rabbit leather up into your hook eye, when you hit this with some super glue, you can purposely get some on that hide, and then you just take a bodkin up through that eye and make sure that it's nice and free, and you use that glue to kind of form around your bodkin and push that hide back, and that glue will then set up on that hide pushed back, and it won't be in your way. Now I like to pop this out of the vise. I'm going to try to keep it in focus here. You can flare these off to the side a little bit, and you want to get a nice 3-dimensional shape to it, and then just take away the crazies. You just want to cut out the outliers. You don't need a massive trim job, because if there's always the tendency to take too much away. So you want to kind of stop yourself from doing that, and don't give yourself the opportunity. And so now what you can see is I have this nice sculpted teardrop shape for a belly, and that's going to hold its shape. It's nice and transparent, a little bit of flash. The SF has good color saturation. It kind of has this a lot of color depth to it. It's not super transparent, but it has transparent fibers along with the flash fibers, right? So it gives you a nice silhouette from the side, nice flash from underneath, and obviously you have the movement of the wing and that rabbit zonker back there kicking, especially with that tapered tail section. So we're going to get this guy articulated, and now that you know the V-style technique, which I don't feel like I explained very well, but maybe I'll do it again. We'll go through story time on maybe why I tied this and some of the people who helped inspire it. So this front hook is going to be a number 1 Ahrex Predator Stinger hook. It's got a size large brass cone head on it. So that's a number 1 Predator Stinger with the size large brass cone head. Coming in with 0.024 inch diameter nylon coated stainless steel, and this is the 49 strand. Make sure it's nice and flexible so it won't kink. Throw on 1 3D bead, get this guy articulated. You can see I got a nice, that bead's there to stiffen up that wire. I have a nice open loop right there you can see in the video for that back hook to articulate in. Gonna wrap this thread back and forth, get that wire tied down. Use your gut again to trim that off, and then check it. Nailed it. Give that a little finger whip finish. I like to butt this cone up here. And then we're going to put a thread dam right up on top of this cone so that cone can't move forward when we're adding our materials back here. And now I'm going to hit all that with super glue to secure that. So this fly was originally inspired by Oscar Hagelin, who, if you don't know him, he's a really cool fly tyer out of Sweden. He's got some pretty good designs out. And he's got a blog that's basically dedicated to streamer fishing. It's a really cool blog. It's called Time Flies by Oscar. And to me, Oscar is kind of like the modern king of rabbit hair. He does some really cool flies with some zonkers, but this hidden conehead idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this conehead under a fish mask, right? He does it with dubbing on one of his zonker. I think it's called the Beef Jerky. And that's what this was originally inspired by. I really like that hidden conehead. So props to Oscar. You should check out his website without hesitation. Secondly, the idea for the stacked SF fibers. I don't remember where that came from, but a lot of my fiber flies are inspired by Norbert Renaud from Flies with Attitude. And he's got a fishing lodge over in Ireland. And he's got a Vimeo account that I would highly, highly recommend. He's got some really cool patterns on there. And I think the one that inspired the stacking SF is actually, it's in one of his videos. I think it's the Gandalf. It's got a fly called the Gandalf fly. And it's a rabbit-tailed zonker pattern with a funky fiber up the belly for the head and shoulders. And it's a really cool pattern that, I don't know, most of my stacked fiber stuff comes from watching his videos. I think they're really, really cool. Other than that, I kind of thought, I've never seen anyone do stacked fiber on a trout fly, and having a few years under my belt now, I've seen Great Lakes Fly has the, I'm pretty sure it's called the Yard Sale, and that's a really cool SF stacked fly. They typically do it in a musky size, but I've seen a trout size that they'll do, and I'm not sure who the designer was. It might be Eli Brandt, but I'm not entirely sure on that one. But that's another really cool SF bug that's trout worthy and worth looking up. And they got a step-by-step, I think they posted on their Facebook page. You might have to search for it, but that's Great Lakes Fly. To me, anytime I see kind of an articulated zonker, my mind always goes back to Kelly Gallup's articulated butt monkey. Probably because that was the first, I don't know, kind of zonker streamer I encountered, was the articulated butt monkey. So to me, that's one of the, I don't know, that's one of the inspirations for this kind of, I'm not sure if I'd call it an inspiration, but just acknowledgement. And I don't believe Kelly came up with the bump monkey, but I'm pretty sure he was the one who articulated it, just for the record. So I'm just doing this V-style stuff here. And what I did on this front hook is I blended that white with a little bit of yellow. I'm talking like, 10 strands, and a little bit of pink, like 10 strands, and then white. And it's not a lot denser than the back hook. It's fairly similar, but we're not going to trim it as much. I'm going to take, here we go, hackle pliers, pull that nice and taut. I like to tie this down behind the cone head. You can certainly tie it in front if you want. You might want to move that cone head back a little bit. Depends on the severity that you want the fly to jig, because you can move the cone head back, right? And the cone head, the mass of the cone is a moment arm on the hook's pivot point. So the closer this is to the fly or the hook eye, the more the fly is going to dive, the more it's going to jig, right? So if you slip that cone head back a position and then drag the rabbit wing over top of it, which is what Oscar does on his beef jerky fly, you'll get a much subtler jig, and it'll act kind of more like just a, I don't know, just weight. It'll just help the fly to slip under. Cut these off. I'm going to put some barred speckled crazy legs on the side. And something with rubber legs that I've mentioned quite a few times, you don't want to tie these in too tight, or else you'll hurt the rubber and they'll break out. So just lightly pin that to the side, give it 3 or 4 covering wraps, and then a whip finish, and you're good to go. Make sure that whip finish, you want that whip finish not visible on the outside of that cone head so that you can tag it with some glue. At least I do. I suppose you can do what you want. There we go. And now before we get to the head, I'm going to trim this belly. Hold it right by the wing, flare this out. Make sure those rubber legs don't get harmed in the making of this fly. And again, I'm just taking out the outliers, and one thing that has really helped me, if you hold this up, just look at the silhouette of the belly and you can kind of see what needs to be trimmed. You take away any of the square edges, make sure that those are nice and rounded. And something that I love about this, the SF fiber is obviously synthetic, right? It's not going to absorb water, but what it does do is it traps water. And you can, you know, the SF is a crinkled fiber, and those waves, when the waves don't line up, they fight each other to create volume. That's why it's so bulky. And so that trapped volume, that air, that trapped water, and that three-dimensional structure that we're sculpting, when this fly rolls and wobbles in the water, it maintains that three-dimensional shape and it reflects that light. And that's, I don't know, that's, to me, it's really, really fishy. It's just a really cool way to build a fly. It's a lot more different than chenille. Definitely going to cut that out. Alright, the head is very simple. We're going to come in with some Monster Dub. I'm going to blend some brown with some tan for the top. And we're going to put straight white on the belly. So basically what you're going to end up here is you can really combine fly styles right now, because this back hook and this front hook are relatively sparse, right? And we don't have a lot of weight. It's just a brass cone head, and we're going to hide it behind a massive dubbing. And I like to tie that dubbing in 40 back, 70 forward. That doesn't add up. 40-60, 70-30, maybe it's 35-65, I don't know. But the amount of dubbing you do is what's going to push the water, and it's what's going to drag on that fly. And so this fly, although it has a jig, if you put enough dubbing up front, you can get the back to kick off at the top of the jig. So you're creating a jig that also articulates. And one of the things that it causes is it causes that back section of the fly to wobble. And it gives it, that's one of the reasons why I like that three-dimensional shape. And I mentioned that belly wobble, throwing that light, but also holding that 3 dimensions while it wobbles, which is one of the cool things. I think in fly tying, a lot of people get caught up with materials that have a lot of movement, you missed my little, whatever those are called, my movement. You know, people are very fond of marabou and all that, and I get that. But to me, it's not like a fish's belly is sitting down there like doing this, right? The tail moves, and the fish, the silhouette, everything is kind of solid except for maybe fins. So I have no problem. I mean, think about Rapalas and things, you know, hard plastic lures, you know, those don't have any movement. That's all head-driven lip bill design, and they have rattles and stuff, right? So to me, having a nice stiff, firm belly that's going to hold its silhouette and not necessarily move in the traditional fly fishing sense is not a bad thing at all, because, I don't know, I think it's very natural. And we got these rubber legs on here. They kind of double as lateral lines, giving a little contrast down the side. The barred and speckledness can kind of give it like a little trout spots depending on the color combo you do. But they also act as fin ray imitations, so they kind of give you the pectoral fin illusion wobbling up at the front of that hook. And I like to do a little thread dam up here with monofilament tying thread, which is going to cure clear under our UV torch. And it adds just enough pressure to push that mask tight against that cone head. And then just make sure that mask is centered on your hook eye and you like your separation of your color seams. So one of the things that I like to do to secure these fish masks, you take some UV resin, and this fish mask has kind of a wide mouth to it, and you fill that corner of that mouth, and the resin will get sucked up into that dubbing, and then you just drag a layer of UV on top of that thread. And what you get is you get UV on the inside and outside of the mask, and it forms basically a UV dam inside and outside holding pressure. And I've never had one of these fail or come off all summer long. It's been a really durable system. And the next thing, this is personal to me, but I really like to put 6mm Flymen eyes, the Fishskull Living eyes, and these are going to be the color Earth. I really like to put the 6mm eyes in the 7mm mask. I don't know why. I just started doing it with the Marabou Minnow a while back, and I really like the way it looks. And something that it does is it gives, we're going to coat this eye with UV resin, and it gives that resin a little bit more room to secure around that eye inside the mask. And I've never had one of these come out either. This has been kind of my go-to jig fly bait fish presentation, are these hidden cone flies, both the Marabou Minnow and this Trout Nugget XL, and I have a Trout Nugget bait fish, which is a smaller pattern. That maybe I'll show you guys another time, but it's the same techniques, more or less. So I secured these with gel super glue, come back in with some UV Diamond Fine Flex, and I'll fill in that eye cavity, and you'll see that a little bit of extra room. If you got any bubbles, you can take them out with a lighter. The heat will pop those, and then you just cure that eye in there. So you can see I have this, trying to not get a glare with the lighting. Maybe I'll show you later. But there's just a little bit of extra room for that resin to grab around that eye. And it makes for a super, super durable system. So one thing that I was talking about, and I'll show you once I get this eye cured in place, really with that dubbing's is your action giver, right? That push of water, something that I talk about quite a bit. That water, it has to hit that dubbing and separate. And when it comes back together, it gives that tail the wiggle, and it gives that rabbit the movement that, well, that we love to see. And because it has that jig, it has that subtle jig with that cone head in there, and you have this big bulk of dubbing. As soon as you lift that fly up, you're going to get a nice tail wobble kick. That was out of focus. I'm not used to not having a GoPro where you can see my entire room. But you jig that fly up, and you're going to get that kick from that dubbing. The head's going to slow that fly down on the paws, and it's just going to hover for a second before it descends back down. And on the drop and the rise, when that fly's in motion, is when that dubbing is going to be pushing water over that tail, giving the fly swimming on the way up, and then a little kick stall belly wobble, right? And you can see those 3 dimensions, which are going to hold its profile in fast current, slow current, still water. You're always going to have this kind of perfect silhouette from that Steve Farrar Flash Blend. And it's just super subtle, flashy, transparent, but still have enough saturation that the profile is evident from, from the side. So that's a Trout Nugget XL. It's fairly simple to tie, extremely durable, awesome bug for smallmouth, brown trout. If you wanted to downsize for pike, spring pike, cold water pike, walleyes, whatever you want to do. So there she is. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys like the new kind of video camera setup, and hopefully I'll be getting some tutorials whipped off once I get caught up on some orders. So thanks for watching, and have a good one.